Wasting time is therefore the most serious of all sins. Max Weber.
When does it make sense to work hard? Are people who grind for hours at their job wasting their time? Do the quiet quitters have a point? Welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. I'm going to discuss a topic that's more entrepreneurship and also has career development and strategy related that I think is rather interesting. And it's the idea of hard work and the correlation between hard work and success. A lot of people think that this is a linear and fixed model that should be constant over time. That if I put in X amount of units of work, I should get Y amount of success and output. But the world is a lot more messy than that. The truth is that the correlation between hard work and success heavily fluctuates over time. I would say from the golden age of the correlation between hard work and success in the United States was probably in the 20th century, where pretty much that entire decade, really, the entire century, except for maybe the 1930s and the 1940s, the correlation between hard work and success was pretty positive. If you put in a lot of effort, you were going to get a good outcome. And if you're willing to put marginally more work than your peers, you would have a better outcome than your peers. However, due to technological disruptions and globalization in the 2000s, the correlation between hard work and success dropped, especially with college becoming more of a mass accessible thing. You're not the only one delaying gratification for 4 years and giving up income to get an education. It's now 40% of the millennial population or more. It kind of skewed a lot of people's perception of hard work and success. And I think it did meaningfully go down. Like until the point of the late 2010s, it was almost flat. Like definitely the level of positivity, the correlation dropped significantly. And it created a lot of people to perceive that it doesn't make sense to put in any effort. Starting with the pandemic, you started to see a gradual shift away from live to work mentality to a work to live mentality. And what we've kind of seen as a result of this is now the hard work to success curve, I think in the last 5 years, has started to tilt positive again. The combination of certain technologies such as AI being able to leverage people's human capital a lot easier than in the past, along with a lot of people just simply quiet quitting and giving up because of a variety of reasons in our society, whether it's sociological, political, economic, or just people seeing their older peers, particularly my generation, struggle in the 2010s where the correlation between hard work and success is at its lowest. They're like, I don't want to repeat this. And so it's caused, or people went through that saying like, look, I'm tired of working hard. It didn't really do anything for me. A lot of people pulling back is creating opportunities that were previously gone when the world was a lot more competitive. Deglobalization might have something to do with that to a certain degree too. So I think the curve is shifting again to reward hard work more than say like it did in the 2000s and 2010s. When does it actually make sense to work hard? Because it doesn't make sense to constantly work hard. There are plenty of people who toil at menial jobs with no upside in their pay and put the most effort into it, and it results in maybe a marginally higher pay increase than if they did the bare minimum over a lifetime. I think a lot of people who have the grind set type of mentality, you always got to work hard, you always got to wake up at 5 a.m. and take the cold shower and just not have a life and go forever just perpetually hard work for the sake of it. Even if you've made your money already, you got to start another startup just to prove you can do it again and work super hard just for the sake of it. It's just a modern day version of Max Weber's Protestant work ethic, which is the idea that in Protestant cultures such as England, Germany, and Scandinavia, they ingrain this idea that you should just work hard for its own sake. Like there is a morality to just working even if it doesn't have a disproportionate payout at the end. And maybe I'm biased because I'm a Catholic, but I just think that this idea is fundamentally wrong. There is no virtue in just work for the sake of it. It needs to have some sort of end in mind. And if it doesn't, then you are wasting your time, and time is precious on this earth. So when does it not make sense to work hard? It does not make sense to work hard when the reward of putting in the extra effort versus doing the bare minimum is not there. The effort to put a certain amount of work versus an extreme amount of work, the reward is not worth the gap. A good example would be like GPAs in college. If you're trying to get a competitive job and you're not intending on going to a top graduate school, then your GPA in college above a certain level, usually like the lowest levels of the cum laude tiers, so like a 3.5 GPA, tenth of a point above 3.5 is not worth the additional work. You've already proven you're smart and diligent, being able to break into the lowest of the cum laude tiers, which is usually around a 3.5 GPA. Depending on what school, it could be a little higher or a little lower. You've proven that you are smart and you are capable to the job market, your family, society, and your own self-satisfaction. So let's say to get to 3.5, you need to do 10 hours a week of studying on top of going to classes. Versus if you want to become valedictorian and get to 4.0, and I'm talking about for college. For high school, it's a little different because to get into some of these elite universities, you really do need to be at those levels. But for college, for people who are not intending on going to elite law school or medical school, even MBA, if you have high enough of a GPA and you had good enough of a job and a GMAT score, you don't need a perfect GPA in undergrad to go to a good MBA program. For additional effort, for say you need for a 3.9, you need to put in, say, an extra 30 hours a week of studying over classes. That the additional amount of effort is not worth the additional 0.4 points to your GPA. It's just not. Like, I could use that other 20 hours for a lot of other things. I could use it to have a social life with my friends. I can use it to take classes that may not be comparative to maximizing my GPA. I'll take maybe a harder class and may not get as a good grade on it, but I'll learn something useful. A lot of these people will maybe not sacrifice in terms of hard work, but they'll sacrifice and they'll take the easiest classes to get a perfect GPA versus taking things that might be useful to learn in school. There's a different kind of cost, but there is a cost there. In terms of the pure hard work example, yeah, like if I'm not doing that time studying, I can do better at networking to get my next job. I could use that time to try new hobbies, get better sleep, or work out and be in better physical shape. There's a lot of other things I could use it for. That leisure probably is more valuable than the extra 20 hours for an extra 0.4 on my GPA. And then let's say if you want to be 4.0, we'll go for valedictorian. The difference between the 3.9 and the 4.0 is probably another 20 to 30 hours above that. So you're going to be putting an extra 50 hours over the 3.5 GPA guy. For what exactly? So you can be the first guy called up on your graduation? I mean, for some people who are naturally very gifted at school and are time efficient, and it's not going to take that much marginal difference, go ahead. But for others, that is not worth it. And there's probably several other examples of this. Say if you work like in the government where promotion is solely based on seniority and not on merit. It doesn't really matter how hard you work above the bare minimum because your promotion and pay schedule is based on seniority, just lasting long enough. So you need to do just enough not to get fired, and you'll have the same outcome as somebody who is burning the midnight oil. Why would you do that if there is no incentive? So now we go with the sense of where it doesn't make sense to work hard. What are the examples where it makes sense to work hard? There's a few. One, if there is a disproportionate payout at the end that is directly based on your efforts. It's not based on other people. It's not based on some bureaucratic system. It's not based on whether a corporation chooses to promote you or not. Instead of investing the time, I don't want to say you put the bare minimum, but like this is kind of the middle ground example. You want to put above the bare minimum, especially early on when you have a new job in corporate America, to prove that you are hardworking, you develop a reputation of being somebody who's competent and capable. You do that in the first 3 to 6 months at really any job. And then after that, you still want to not completely coast. You still want to do above the bare, but you don't need to go completely above and beyond, because that time that you could use instead should be used to develop better relationships with your colleagues, particularly your superiors. And that politicking will ultimately get you promoted. So instead of working at midnight to finish some assignment, you should go out and play golf with your boss. That doesn't sound like it would be a higher yield result, but it probably would actually be a higher yield activity for your career. If you want to advance or switch careers, instead of working the midnight oil to get a promotion that may result in a 5 to 10% increase in your pay and a slightly better title, instead you can continue your self-education, use those new skills to either get a completely better job or to prepare yourself for the entrepreneurial world. Like, which one is like working harder? That's kind of the question there. So that's kind of sense where it makes sense to put in like a medium marginal effort. Something that in terms of a high marginal effort, it takes sense to really grind and put in the long hours. In corporate America, it doesn't make sense to work longer than 55 to 60 hours a week. You're going to put your energy into enriching somebody else. And 55 to 60 hours a week is enough time that you can go above and beyond. Because most people, the average work week in America is 34 hours a week. The average person who's employed, their average work week is 41 hours a week. So by putting in, say, an extra 9 hours a week, which is like an hour and a half each day, you're already going above and beyond to show that you're not lazy and doing the bare minimum. But the person who's staying at the office all night is not really gaining that much of an edge over you. You can use the rest of that time to have a more well-rounded life and be a happier and healthier person, and you will be able to win the long game better doing that, and also probably develop better skill set and become a more well-rounded person overall and have better social relationships, which will help you with your career and your ability to politic in the future on the corporate side. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you will be able to improve your education and learn about the things you need to be a successful entrepreneur. But where does it make sense to really put in the extra hours and just completely go all out and work the super long hours? There are times when it makes sense, when the extra effort is proportionately rewarded. And that is mostly in two ways. One is if you're starting your own business, everything is on you. The buck stops with you, which means if you put in the extra effort and work the long hours, you will gain the return from it because it's your company. A good example would be professional tennis, where if you improve, it directly increases your probability of winning because there really are not that many upsets. It is mostly whoever wins the marginal point 90% of the time will win the game. It's like goes back to that book I like to refer to, The Success Equation by Michael Mauboussin. If you are competing in a game of skill at the highest level, like you're a professional tennis player, it makes sense to go all in and work as hard as you can. The marginal amount of practice might be the difference if you're the number 1 player in the world versus the number 3 player in the world or the number 10 player in the world. Another one where it makes sense is outside the world. Like if you're a sales guy and you're the one who makes the most calls, you have the most shots on goal, you're probably going to have a much higher probability of hitting your quota or leading your team. Another example would be if you are in the markets and it's a particularly volatile time, it makes sense to do a lot of research because people are panicking. There's a lot of buying opportunities. This is not going to last forever because the troughs of bear markets are generally very short time periods. It's time to spend all night reading the research you need to do to figure out what trades you need to make. Execute those within this short window of time because the potential rewards of getting it right are way higher in times of market stress than in a more normal or high valuation market where you can afford to be more patient because the opportunity set is not likely to dramatically get worse than it is right now. You're likely not as likely to miss a boat. It's not just when the bottom of a bear market or a period of market distress, but there's these certain times in any business or industrial cycle where the opportunities to make deals or to make moves, you need to go all in, because these are windows where you're going to get opportunities that only come once every 3 to 5 years. And that is the time to capitalize on it. When it's a slower and normal environment, you can scale down your work hours and have a more relaxing life when the marginal effort of that additional energy is not there. And then the third one is also when you start your own business, because as an entrepreneur, especially in a competitive market, growing as fast as you can is the way you win and survive. If you're not doing it, there's probably a competitor in your industry who is. A lot of tech companies especially need to blitz scale. Once you get to a certain size where growth becomes self-compounding, you could slow down or you could sell the company and you can have your life of leisure for a while after that and relax for all the excess hours. And other times might be if you go to a very prestigious university or doing something, a very hard task that is known to be difficult and require a lot of hours, but it's for a short period of time. Example, maybe getting an Ivy League degree, maybe going to medical school would be in that category. It makes sense to put the extra effort in because that's what it needs to do to get done. You're not trying to outshine everybody and work a bunch of excess hours just for vanity. There's just a high amount of minimum hours you need to do the job right or to complete the difficult goal right. And that's another time where it makes sense to work hard, because the long-term payout, for example, completing your medical degree, is if you want to be a doctor, a life full of purpose that is hard to replicate in other professions, along with the high payouts in terms of income and salaries that you will get for being a doctor and the social prestige. So the reward is clearly definable and attainable. And when the reward is clearly definable and attainable and it's all in your power, whether you get it or not, for example, the med students, they get good enough grades in med school and pass all of their requirements. Or the business owner who knows if they can grow their company to a certain level by a certain point, they're going to have a very good lifestyle business for the rest of their life, or they're going to be able to sell this company for a high enough price that work becomes optional instead of mandatory, then yeah, it makes the effort because the reward is clearly definable and speed is of the essence in some of this case, or the minimum effort needed to get there is very definable and clear. That's when it makes sense to work hard. When you have a clear end goal in mind and you have a certain amount of steps you know you need to get done, and they're going to take a lot of time due to just the speed of the matter or the intense workload associated with it. It's not about showing face time and just being like, oh, I'm working hard to prove that I'm harder working than the other guy. That's where it doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of the problem with the grind set people is that they don't realize that hard work is a seasonal thing. Grinding all in is a seasonal thing. Maybe depending on your career, it's maybe a certain time of the year or a certain time of the business cycle. Or if you are taking a certain risk in your career, it's a certain stage of life where it makes sense to work hard. But if you do that indefinitely, you will burn out and get disillusioned and your health will be compromised physically. People, especially past the age of 30, are not built to be working 80 hours a week the rest of your life. That's how you get heart attacks and other health problems later in life, for that kind of consistent grind. You need to figure out, where is my hard work being rewarded? What do I need to do to get there? Do I feel like it's worth it? And if the answer is yes, it's worth it, then you go all in and make sure that you succeed in doing it so that it is worth it. So that's kind of my thoughts on hard work. And I've gone through all these cycles myself. I was not rewarded for hard work success. And I used to, in my early years, like a lot of millennials, assumed I should always put max effort into things. But unlike maybe other millennials, I was a little bit more clear, maybe because I grew up in a family of business owners, of the payouts and the game theory that I've mentioned and where it really does make sense to work hard. When I find a place where it does make sense to work hard, I go all in. And you've probably seen that with the effort that I do in this channel. I work hard on the things that I think on the margin actually matter. That is the way I recommend approaching this, instead of the blind Protestant work ethic idea that I have to work hard, maximum effort on everything I do, no matter what. Instead, you got to find the places where your hard work is the most rewarded and you have a definable endpoint to where you put that work in and what kind of outcome you would expect. Put your energy into that. Sometimes that time is indefinite, so it's not always a fixed thing. Like starting a business, for example. There are going to be cycles of time that it might take a lot longer than you expect, but there's a certain level. It's time you could turn down the jets a little bit, and you kind of know when that is and what you're working towards, and that's what's really important. Hopefully you got some value out of this conversation. Let me know. What are your thoughts on hard work? Do you think you should always constantly be on the grind? Are you more of a work to live person and don't think anything is really worth the extra effort? Or you have found certain niches or certain parts of your life where it does make sense to go all in? If so, what are those parts? Does it make sense to go all in and work hard? Is it the same view as me, or do you have a different perspective on this? I'd love to hear it in the comments. Thank you for watching.